I think I'm very lucky that I have a business partner who doesn't hold me back as well. If anything, he encourages some of these stupid, crazy ideas that I have. And I'm encouraged to go and try it out, brew a test batch. And if it fails, it fails, right? My mindset has switched to what I would call legacy planning, where instead of leaving her just money, I want to kind of leave her a legacy for her to inherit, build on, do with it whatever she wants.
Welcome to Before We Get There, the podcast where we explore people's journeys, how they got to where they are, what keeps them pushing forward, and where they eventually want to get to. I'm your host, Nicholas Braman, and today I'm joined by Sanjay Jegatheeson. Sanjay is a Singaporean who started Singapore's first meadery, in addition to his full-time career and many, many hobbies. We discussed his journey so far, how he discovered mead, starting his business, balancing work and family time, what he's looking forward to in the future, and much more. Enjoy the show.
Hi, good to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for joining me. So what I wanted to talk to you first is about your meadery, and I think that you have an interesting story of how you found out about mead and then how you started the business. So maybe you can start by sharing that with us.
So I first encountered mead many years ago. I think it was more than a decade ago on a trip to London, and fell in love with it. Realized that it wasn't just something that I saw it in games or read about it in books, but it actually existed. And then came back, started researching more about it, finding out more about it. And back then I was actually home brewing beer already. And then I found a couple of recipes online and realized that I had all the equipment to make mead as well. So I started experimenting it, started working out different recipes. One thing led to another. It became an obsession of sorts to actually start making good mead. And then back in 2018, 2019, had an opportunity with a friend of mine, my business partner now, Justin, who enjoyed drinking mead as well. And we had this crazy idea to start a meadery in Singapore. Sat down, we did the math, we did the sums, realized that it could work. And that's the story. That's how we started back in 2019. Fast forward now to 2025. We've got a good distribution system in place. We are in Singapore and Malaysia, and we're looking to expand into Thailand and further countries in the region.
That's really cool. So maybe we should actually start by explaining what mead is for anybody who doesn't know.
Sure. So mead is basically taking honey and fermenting it into alcohol. So if you ferment grains, you get beer. You ferment grapes, you get wine. If you ferment honey, you get mead.
And it's one of the most ancient types of alcohol. Right?
Yeah. Historically, it is the oldest form of alcohol in the world. Long before humans made beer and wine, it started with mead, and every culture in the world has its own version of a alcoholic fermented honey drink. If you look at drinks like Tej in Ethiopia, that is also made from fermented honey. The main reason behind it is to make wine, you needed grapes, but grapes had to be grown, right? If you wanted beer, you needed grains like malt that had to be grown. Whereas with honey, it didn't need to be grown. You just had to find a beehive and harvest. So that helped propagate mead around the world because there wasn't an agricultural requirement for it to be a product in a sense.
Right. So it's one more step in the process.
One step less, correct.
Yeah. And so how about in Asia? Are there traditional alcohols that are made from honey?
So in Asia, as far as I know, in China, there is a form of mead. I don't remember what the exact name is, but there is an ancient alcoholic beverage made from honey back in ancient China.
And so what was it? Like you mentioned, mead is maybe something you read about in books on fantasy novels or see in games and RPGs and that sort of thing. But then you when you first tasted it and discovered it's a real thing that is still made today. What was it about the drink itself that you liked?
I think overall, it's like the versatility of what we can do with mead. Yes, it's the base ingredient is water, honey, and yeast, right? But there's so much you can do to it. Like with LCM, what we've done, we've got a hibiscus blueberry where we infused hibiscus flowers and blueberries into it. We've got a spiced mead where, we have cinnamon, cloves, star anise in there. Have a chrysanthemum mead, which we made with chrysanthemum flowers. Yes, while the base ingredient is all the same, all these three products taste vastly different from each other. And, a lot of people don't believe us when we say that all three are meats because they just taste so different.
And so then you're brewing by yourself for yourself, and I'm sure your friends and family at home, but to transfer that into a business for paying customers is a pretty big leap. So after you made the decision that you wanted to go ahead and try this, what was that process like?
Oh, it was completely nerve-wracking. I knew I had a good product, but that knowing is based off feedback that you get from people that you know as well. So I always take that with a pinch of salt, right? But I realized that what I really wanted to do was just to put forth the best product that I could, right? When we first started it, there was only one other person in Singapore making mead. His name was Simon. And he was making something very traditional, and what we call traditional mead, which is mead that is more like wine. So you're looking at 10% to 14% and above ABV. We decided to do something called low ABV mead or beer style meads, where our meads will come in at like 5% or so and carbonated. So there was really no one else doing what we were doing at that point. And we didn't know how the market would accept it. So the one thing that we did know was that if we put our best product forward and let the market judge, we'll give it a year, we see where it goes, and then we decide from there. And the first year was just amazing. We got so much love, we got so much support. The products really took off, and yeah, we're here now, we're here to stay.
So what was the learning journey like? I mean, first of all, I think there's from a logistics standpoint to be able to ramp up, and I'm sure there's some certifications or different things you need to do to make the product itself. But then you add in all these the marketing, the distribution, the getting the bottles and the labels and all that sort of thing. What were some of the big challenges that you had to get through to get up and running?
So with a lot of what you said, I think with the marketing, with the logistics, we were lucky that we had friends who were in all these different areas that we could go to for advice, and they helped us out. We spoke to a couple of people who were already in the industry, in the beer brewing industry. Got their advice on, how to get the proper paperwork sorted out and all that. So I think the logistics part of setting up the business and getting product was relatively painless in the grand scheme of things, right? I think what the real challenge was the consumer education. We've been around since 2019, 6 years now, right? We're in our 6th year. And not happening as much as when it first started, but occasionally we still get, oh, you guys sell meat. What do you guys sell? Wagyu? Do you sell pork chops, lamb chops? Right? People hear meat and they think that we're mispronouncing it as meat. So it's thankfully it's happening a lot less now, but it still happens occasionally. But in the beginning, no one knew what meat was. We really had to go out there. We had to do a lot of road shows. We had to do a lot of small events and really just educate people, educate consumers on what we were doing. We used to get things like, oh, is this beer? And it's like, no, it's not beer. So what is it? Or, oh, so if this is fermented from honey, that means is it non-alcoholic? I'm like, no, there is still sugar and honey. Ferment sugar, you still get alcohol. So it was just a lot of that in the early days.
That's hilarious. But okay, so I think that's it. So, but the market has changed. Do you think it's primarily because of you, or in general, is there just more awareness and people have heard about it mean more?
I would like to say it's us, but I can't take all the credit for it. To be fair, I think Lion City Meadery has, and I'll be very bold to say this, right? We kind of helped open the market up. Ever since we started, other beer importers or alcohol importers in Singapore started bringing in mead. We started seeing imports of superstition coming in. So consumer education has definitely improved, right? Consumer awareness has definitely improved. And with more distributors bringing in mead, it will grow the market, it will grow the industry. And with that, the consumer awareness will come naturally.
And so with your name, Lion City Meadery, obviously it comes from Singapore, being the Lion City. I see some of the other homegrown brands, specifically things like the craft breweries. I think it's nice to support local brands, of course, and they sometimes tie things back to whether that's local flavors or ingredients. How do you guys incorporate that in? Do you need that?
So we have what we call our core range, which is our classic, the hibiscus blueberry, the spice mead. Those are our core range. Those are what we call international flavors, where those flavors pretty much translate across the world, no matter where you're from. But we also do seasonals, where our seasonals are one batch, single batch produced, and our seasonals are themed more local. So like the first seasonal we did was the chrysanthemum mead, where it was reminiscent of the chrysanthemum teas that grandmothers used to brew for us, right? Very Asian, very local, very Singaporean. We followed that up with a red date longan. Again, very local, if you aren't from the Southeast Asian region, it's unlikely that it's unlikely that these flavors would mean anything to you from a childhood memory point of view. So that's what we've been trying to do with our seasonals, is that we try to invoke that, childhood flavors, childhood memories, and try to bring that back.
That's fun. Yeah, I've tried a few of the flavors and they're all delicious.
Thank you.
So I think, starting a business like this, and it wasn't necessarily where your background is, right? Were there any big moments when maybe you walked into the supermarket and you saw your bottles on the shelves, or, in your favorite bar or restaurant or something like that? Were there any big moments like that?
I think definitely walking into cold storage and seeing our things on the shelf, that was a big moment. But I think the biggest moment for me, and this was because it was more like a point of validation, was back in 2019. We started in 2018 officially, started brewing in 2018. 2019 was our first year of like proper operations. In July 2019, we took part in our very first Beer Fest Singapore, or Beer Fest Asia. And part of it was the Asian Beer Award, where we submitted our meats into it. And we came away with a silver, I think it was a silver, and we came away with the best of Singapore, which meant so it's an Asia-based competition, and it was our spiced mead that got best of Singapore. So that was judged as being the best product that was made in Singapore to come out of Singapore. And to me, that was like the biggest moment since we started. And then from then on, we've been winning awards pretty much year after year, both regionally and both internationally. We've won the Mead Madness Cup. We won medals at the Mead Madness Cup over the last 2-3 years now. Hopefully, we'll keep that streak going as well.
That's awesome. So that best out of Singapore award, that was going up against all kinds of beverages.
That was pretty much going up against all the beers that the Singapore brewers were submitting. So, as I always said, we took a non-beer product to a beer competition and we came in best.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So you're doing all this for Lion City Meadery that you talked about. You have, to go to a lot of events and go to these shows, but this is not your full-time job. You have a career that you do as well.
Correct. This is the retirement plan. This is how I hope to retire in, 10, 15, 20 years time. My full-time job is in events. I do AV production for an event agency in Singapore. So that's the full-time job that takes up most of my time. And then on the weekends or in the evenings, that's when I focus on LCM.
And you've been a freelancer as well at some points, is that right?
I started my career as a freelancer, but since I would say 2000, so backtrack. I started my career in the events AV industry back in 2001. Oh God, I'm old. 2001, that's when I started freelancing, first steps into the industry. I did freelance work, like full-time freelance work for about 6 years. 2007 was when I first got my first full-time job. But in between, like if I had breaks during jobs, I would go and take on a freelance project.
From a personal career development perspective, how do you feel about, kind of being freelance where maybe contract to contract, or you kind of have multiple people coming to you, but not a long-term stable role versus a traditional full-time job with one company?
I think it really depends on what your needs are. The one thing so in 2007, the reason I decided to take on a full-time job was I decided, or I realized that I needed a bit more stability in my life, and going full-time was, well, I wouldn't say the only way, but was the easiest way for me to ensure that I have stability. Would I have made more money doing freelance all the way? Probably yes, but I didn't want to have to worry about, chasing for payments, doing a job and then payment comes in late and then having to put food on the table, but money isn't coming in. And I think that's probably one of the biggest issues that a lot of freelancers face. And yeah, I just decided that stability ranked probably the highest at that point in life priorities. And that's the route I've taken. I don't regret the decisions.
No, that's good. Thanks for sharing. I'm quite interested in this topic because I think recently we see even fields that are not traditionally have people working side jobs or freelancing. There's new fractional roles for CMOs and other C-suite, chief of product, all these kind of things where people are maybe coming, or some sets of people are coming to the conclusion that you need to be a personal brand, and not just a brand, but a personal business, and being dedicated to one company or relying on one company for your sole source of income for the long term is not necessarily the most secure way to do things. And so, I don't think it's more than just the creator economy or the solopreneur or entrepreneur economy, but even people who are very successful with big brands are adding on to their portfolio and offering, whether that's education courses or coaching and that sort of thing, so that they have a more diversified sources of income, and as well as leveraging their expertise because they're working on more than one project at a time. So it's interesting that you've done that from a long time ago. And I think, it's definitely becoming more common over the last few years, especially. So that leads me to the question. You're doing the meadery, you're working your full-time job. I see you travel all the time. How do you fit everything in?
Creative time management. Like, as funny as cliche as it is, it's true. It's really about managing time. It's also about setting very clear boundaries, right? I know that at the end of the day, my paycheck comes from my full-time job, right? That's my paymaster. That's ultimately who I'm responsible towards in that sense, right? The full-time job will always take precedence over everything else because that is the company that is putting food on the table for me, right? So, that will, in terms of work, that will always take priority. And then the meadery comes second, pretty much, because that's my own business. Anything else, any freelance job that I would take will come in after that. But the top priority would always be family. I'm married with one kid, so that will always be the number one priority for me. And it's about setting clear boundaries. Like, I'm lucky to work in a company that offers a 4-day week, right? So I either have a Monday or Friday off. And that one day off, be it Monday or Friday, I actually use it for the meadery as well, because the wife is at work, the kid is at school. But on the weekend, Saturday, Sundays, that is purely for the family as much as I can, unless like I'm traveling for work, then it's a separate issue. Or if we're doing like beer fest again and, I'm out on the weekends. But out of 52 weekends in a year, I would say I spent 70% of it with the family. And you just got to keep those boundaries very clear and know that, yes, I have to do all of this, but I also have to find time for things that matter as well. And it's about how you plan your time, plan your day, plan your schedule. It's a lot of juggling. I'm also very thankful I have a wife that is very understanding. Just last year, I was away for the whole month of November because I was on multiple shows around the region. Just for my wife, just let me get through all of this, right? It's going to be a month that is going to be shitty, but once we get through that month, you will have time. Like December, I'm clearing my leave. I'll be home all through December. We will have time together. And I made sure that, when I came back from my KL trip, the last 2 weeks of December, I was away from work. I was away from the meadery. I was away from everything else. And that 2 weeks was solely just for the wife and the kid.
So first of all, how old is your daughter now?
My she turns 11 in April.
11, okay.
Yep.
Getting big already.
Yeah.
Good. So was that always the case? Like, obviously now 11 is a little bit different than when you have a toddler or a small child. How are you able to navigate earlier on in the parenting journey?
I think earlier on when my daughter was younger, my job was a bit different as well. Again, when she was a kid, I didn't have the meadery. I was working a sales job, which was very 9 to 5. So I had the evenings, I had the weekends, and that was all great. I only started to expand and do more things as she got older and a little bit more independent. And from then, that's where all right, she's a bit more independent now. She can go to school by herself, come back by herself, get her own lunch. If I'm not home in time for dinner, I know she can fix dinner herself. So that gave me a bit more freedom to go out and do more things.
So I want to get back to parenting, but first of all, so you mentioned, for example, the last 2 weeks of the year, you just had this really busy period. And so you took time off from work, which is obviously a more formal process, but then you also weren't working on anything to do with your own business.
Yeah.
And we've talked to several entrepreneurs on the show, and I think it's a fairly common theme that when you're running your own business, it's possible to always feel like there's more to do. And so how do you, it's a little bit different than setting boundaries with your work or your external engagements. It's more of an internal mental boundary that you need to set for yourself. So has that always been something that you did, or how did you get to have that discipline?
Yeah, I think it's like what you said. It's also that physical mental boundary that you set for yourself. Like I said, when I rank things at the end of the day, my family will always be the highest priority. So I will always make time for them. I think it helps that with the brewery, I've got a good business partner. I've got good staff on board, right? Again, in the early days of the business, it was just, everything was very hands-on. But, 5-6 years down the road, we've expanded, we've grown to the point where we actually have staff to do things like that now. I can afford to take a back seat a little bit.
How was the process of getting up to that point? Is it the first time that you've, maybe when you hired your first employee, it's a pretty big step. How was the transition? And did you even feel like comfortable yourself handing off your homegrown business that you've worked so hard on and letting other people take responsibility for some of those aspects?
So I think right from the start, we always knew that there would be a day where that would have to happen. I think just coming out of COVID, that's when we decided, look, our time could be better used for more important things. Like my business partner realized that he had more time on his hands. He could actually travel a little bit more to visit distributors in other countries to grow the distribution network, right? But he couldn't because he was stuck here trying to do the business development and the sales here in Singapore. Instead of brewing and R&Ding, I was running around doing deliveries on my own. So the early days of the business, I did all the operations. So the orders would come in, I would go into the office, I would pack the orders, put it in the van, drive out, spend 8-9 hours just dropping orders off, doing deliveries all day, come back and then start thinking about, all right, recipe development and all of that. And we just realized, we had grown to a point where that wasn't the most sustainable way to do things anymore. Like if we didn't hire someone in to come and help us, as a business, we couldn't grow because both the founders were stuck doing the day-to-day thing, right? So hiring people in to handle the small picture stuff, while as founders, we start looking bigger picture. I think that has really helped. It is a very important step that you have to take.
That's great. Speaking, you mentioned recipe development a couple of times, and that makes me curious. Have you ever had a recipe, something that you thought was going to turn out really great, and it ended up not coming out so good?
Yeah, I mean, it's part and parcel of trials, right? Pat, ideas that on paper seemed really, really good, and then you brew it and you realize the flavors clash, or the flavors, there wasn't anything distinctive about it. You and then you try to sit down and then you reconceptualize everything. You realize something sounds really good on paper, but in practice, it was a completely different picture. And there were certain recipes we knew would turn out really well, but the commercial cost of doing those were also very prohibitive. But that has never stopped me from having crazy ideas. I think I'm very lucky that I have a business partner who doesn't hold me back as well. If anything, he encourages some of these stupid, crazy ideas that I have. And I'm encouraged to go and try it out, brew a test batch. And if it fails, it fails, right? We know that, like what Edison said, I didn't find a way to make a light bulb. I found 9,000 ways not to make one. Same thing, right? If I fail, I then look at why it failed. Was it a brewing process? Was it a treatment of a particular ingredient process? Or, was it a flavor combination process? And then I go like, all right, if I were to redo this again, how would I make it better? Right? And that's always been the driving force and the thought process behind our R&D process.
That brings up another good question, because we've talked to other artists and authors and creatives on the show, and one theme that comes up is, when is something good enough? I think for writing and for art, it's the artist or the creator themselves, they have to decide, can I keep improving this, or has it reached the point where I'm happy with it? Is that the same for mead? Could you keep optimizing or improving your recipes? Or how do you just hit that note, this is the flavor that I was aiming for from the start?
I think from the get-go, when I develop a recipe, in my head, I kind of have a preconception of what I want it to taste like, right? And then we do the test batch, and the very first time that I taste it, if it tasted exactly what I had in my mind, to me, that's done, right? Can I obsess over it? Can I continually try to improve it? I can, but to what end? At the end of the day, I have to be very conscious that this is still a business, right? And if I have a product, if I have a product that is ready to go, that product needs to hit the market in order for the business to make the money that it needs to make. So yeah, like I said, I have this preconception in my head of what I want it to taste like. And if the first time I try it hits all those flavor notes that I've had in my head, that's good to go. If it doesn't, we make a little bit of tweaks, we make a bit of adjustments to get it where we need it to be. and it's good to go again.
So that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it in depth, but I guess that wouldn't have been the way I would have expected it to go. So you have an idea of what you want the finished product to taste like,
Correct.
and then you work to build up to that point.
Correct.
Has there been a time maybe where there's one specific ingredient or flavor profile that you want to use, and then you have to figure out what will combine well with that, or it's always that final taste that you already have an idea about?
So if it's a product for ourselves, in that sense, I always have an idea of what I want the finished product to be like. But we've also had collaborations, and for example, after Chinese New Year, we have a new product coming out. This was in conjunction with Momo Films, who released a new movie last year, right? And this brew that we made was specifically for them to celebrate the launch of the new movie. And because it's not just us, there are other stakeholders involved now. There were a lot of back and forth discussions on what they wanted. And so taking all their comments, all their feedback, I brewed something special for them. We had to import plums from Vietnam for this, like 900 kilos worth of plum. And then we made a test batch, passed it to them. And when they tried the test batch, their face lit up instantly. And that's when I knew, like, we're good. They're obviously happy with it, So we are definitely in the right direction. And they just gave us the go ahead. There were 0 tweaks that they wanted. They didn't want anything changed. They were happy with what we gave them. So yeah, I think that's how we generally work. I think everyone has a preconception of what they want things to turn out in their head, regardless of what they say. Right? And it's just whether you take the steps to get to that point.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think it's definitely a perspective shift for me. Maybe that's why I'm not an artist, because I'm realizing now as I talk to more people that they have a vision in their mind ahead of time, and then they figure out what they need to do to get there. I think maybe for some projects or work I have it, but I haven't thought about it that way before. So it's probably more of just a perspective switch. But that's very interesting. So I also wanted to talk to you more about, like I said, parenting and fatherhood, because you are further along in the journey than I am. My daughter is just over 2 years old now. She started preschool. Last week was her first couple days of preschool. So that's another big milestone that I've hit. But how do you think becoming a father has changed you?
I think it's made me a lot more grounded. It's made me become a bit more of a realist as well. Less idealist, more realist. I think from a career perspective, it's given me more drive. Like, I'm no longer just working for myself, right? I am working for the future of my daughter and trying to give her the best possible head start she can have in life. I'm going to try and do everything I can to put her in a position where she can benefit from all of that, from all of my hard work. So I think that's driven me more in my career and my business. I'd say that when I was single, the mindset was about savings and growing the money in that sense. But with a 10-year-old now, my mindset has switched to what I call legacy planning. Like, yeah, I could die and leave her a sum of money, but what is that money gonna do for her in the long run? I've switched to a mindset where instead of leaving her just money, I want to kind of leave her a legacy for her to inherit, build on, do with it whatever she wants. So Lion City is a good example of that, right? It's a great business. We're doing well, in 20 years, if she wants to inherit that business and take it forward, that's a legacy that will grow with her. It's things like that I'm starting to put in place and go like, what can I leave for my daughter that is not just money?
That's interesting. Has she expressed interest in the business already?
I think at this point, she's still a bit too young to fully grasp what we do as a business. Like, she knows the business exists. She's been with me to the office. She used to follow me on my delivery rounds, but bit by bit, I will start to introduce more of the business to her. And look, at the end of the day, if she has no interest and she doesn't want a part of the business, that's fine as well, right? She's free to choose what she wants to do in life. It's her own life ultimately. And if it comes to it, sell the business, she gets a sum of money, whatever. That sets her up as well. Yeah. So there are options at the end of the day.
So that's another thing when you mentioned your daughter's doing jiu-jitsu and golf, and are these interests that came from you doing them originally and then she picked it up, or is it the other way around?
Yep, it's from me. So when she was, I think, 3 or 4, that's when I started golfing. So she would follow me to the range. She would follow me on the course. And then when she was like 5, 6, I think, around there, she suddenly told me that she wanted to learn how to play golf. I initially ignored it, but she pestered me about wanting to play golf for a good 6 months. So I called up. So it was at that point that I called a friend of mine. He's a golf professional. He coaches, and he primarily coaches kids. We brought her down, gave her like 10 balls, I think. And on her very first swing, she made contact with the ball. But wasn't a great shot by any means, right? But if you've tried to play golf before, you would know that trying to make contact, just touching the ball with the club, is not as easy as it looked. And she did it with her first swing. And we're like, maybe lucky shot, right? And she went through all 10 balls, making contact, I think 7 out of the 10 times. And that's when we looked at each other and went like, there might be something in it. She might have potential in it. So she's been golfing since she was 6. Jiu-jitsu was something that she started last year. Again, because I used to train. Well, I still train. I used to compete. So she would come and watch the comps and all that. And Phil Assembly had the kids camp at
Yeah.
It was during the school holidays, so I thought, it would be a fun 2-day activity that would occupy her time during the school holidays. So I signed her up for that without her knowledge, without her permission. I just did it. Right? Brought her down. It's like, all right, you're doing this for the next 2-3 hour camp. I can't remember. I was like, you're doing this for the next couple of hours. I'm going to go and have a coffee, whatever. I'll come pick you up when you're done. So that went on for 2 days. At the end of it, I asked her, is this something that you want to carry on doing? And she said, yes.
That's cool. Yeah, I've been trying to bring my daughter once a week or once every couple of weeks down at the gym, and she just hangs out while I train, but just to get her used to the environment, even just to see me exercise and roll and be around that kind of environment. I have no idea if she'll ever want to pick it up, but she sees me sitting in front of the computer working all the time. So it's nice and she knows I go to the gym. So now at least she has an idea of where I'm going and what I'm doing when I leave the house with my gear on. But that's another thing I wanted to ask you, because I think you played rugby before in the past as well. So where did all these interests and activities come from? And then again, how do you manage to keep them and fit them into your busy life?
So I started playing rugby when I was 11 because I had cousins, I had uncles who all played rugby. And it was just like a very natural thing that the family was doing, and I just started doing it. And I played competitively all the way till I was about 23. That's when I stopped playing competitive rugby. But I still played, social rugby. I still played like weekend matches till I was about 27, 28. Then I stopped. And then for some reason, I started doing MMA, Fight G at that point. Did the whole boxing, Muay Thai, BJJ route circuit with them. And that's when I realized I actually loved jiu-jitsu as a sport.
But I can see how rugby and MMA and jiu-jitsu they're adjacent or have some similarities, but golf is completely out of left field compared to that. How did you find your interest in golf?
So, to be honest, I had zero interest in golf. I used golf as I started learning how to play golf as a networking tool. right? Yeah, to meet people, to be able to talk to people. And look, when you're on a golf course with someone, that guy is stuck with you for 4 hours, whether he likes it or not. And in that 4 hours, you can really learn a lot about someone, right? How they behave, how they play, how they react to their shots, how they react to your shots, right? And it's that, to me, it's the people aspect of golf. Like, I have a very bad game. My swings are bad, but I enjoy the people aspect of it. I enjoy the networking aspect of it.
That's interesting because, I think we say the same thing about jiu-jitsu is you can learn a lot about somebody's personality by the way they roll, but that's for 5 or 6 minutes, not for 4 hours. That's an interesting point. I never thought about it that way. But I think maybe the only other similarity I thought of when you bring up golf and jiu-jitsu is that they are both incredibly frustrating, which makes them addicting. I think that's why golf, people get stuck on golf because you always feel like, oh, the next shot,
it's going to be better.
I can do better.
Yeah. It's exactly that. It's really chasing that 1% growth each time. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you shank one off into the woods. And
and then buy new balls because you keep losing them.
So I think that your path in jiu-jitsu, I didn't realize it was that long. But so actually one thing I thought about talking to you about, because even just when we met in 2020, that's already 4 years ago. One thing, actually. Oh yeah, jeez, it's already 2025. One thing that I notice is how many, probably at this point, hundreds of people I've seen come and go from jiu-jitsu. And there is this maybe cult-like aspect to jiu-jitsu where people maybe can look down on people who aren't training enough or training hard enough, or people who quit, which is kind of strange because like golf, you don't say, oh, people quit golf. They're just not playing for now. They moved on, or, they're busy or whatever. But we say quitting jiu-jitsu, like they're giving up kind of on jiu-jitsu. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I think you've also taken breaks for yourself.
I have taken breaks. There were times where I've thought about quitting the sport completely just because I wasn't progressing as fast as I thought I would be. The progress wasn't there. And you naturally get very disheartened, right? You're putting in all this work, you're putting all this effort, but you're not growing the way you thought you would grow. And because of that, I was tempted to quit a few times. I know it's not supposed to be, but jiu-jitsu has always been kind of like therapy for me as well. I think it's the same for a lot of people who do it. There's this meme that goes around, right? Jiu-jitsu is not therapy, go see a therapist. But, it's a form of therapy. It shouldn't replace, if you need therapy, please go see a professional. It shouldn't replace the professional, but it is a form of therapy. It's an alternate form of therapy. But yeah, I think that works for me. And it's a point where, if whatever comes, it comes when it comes, right? It's the process that matters more now. One of the things that I plan to do this year is I plan to go back to competing again. I took a year and a half, 2-year break from competition.
Cool. Well, one thing that sounds like a great goal for this year, but one question I like to ask my guests is, and I think you mentioned some of them already very long term, but specifically maybe in the more medium term over the next 5 years, if we talk again 5 years from now and you look back at what's happened from now until then, what are some things for both yourself personally as well as for Lion City Meadery that you would like to achieve and would make you feel like that time frame was a success?
Well, for myself, in 5 years, if I maintain or improve the level of fitness I have right now, that in itself is a win, right? As you age, the fitness gets harder to maintain. That's the reality of life. So, in 5 years, 10 years, if I maintain the same level of fitness now or more, if it improves, that's a great win. In terms of business, I would definitely like to see Lion City in more countries, preferably beyond the region. So right now we look in the next the growth plan for the next 2 years is Southeast Asia for sure. Right? 5 years time, the logical expansion would be Asia in itself. But in the next 5 years, if we go beyond Asia, we go to Europe, we go into the US, that would be the dream. Yeah.
That'll be cool. Maybe next time I'm back in the States, I'll see a bottle in Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or somewhere.
We'll try. We're working towards it. Just importation or exportation into the US comes with its own set of headache, which we've been looking at the paperwork just to familiarize ourselves with it when the day it happens, but it's a minefield of its own.
I can imagine. All right, and where can people find you or find Lion City Meadery if they'd like to pick up a six-pack?
If you want to find Lion City Meadery, the easiest place would be Cold Storage. We are in all Cold Storages in Singapore. Or if you go to our website, lioncitymeadery.com, there is a list of all the retailers that carry our stuff, be it on tap or in bottles.
And how about on social media?
Social media, Facebook, Lion City Meadery, same thing for Instagram. Follow us there. You'll find links to, everything is available on both. Yeah, we're only on Facebook and Instagram at this point. That's where you would find everything you need to know about us.
Okay, great. We'll put the links to the website and socials in the show notes. So thanks again for being with me, Sanjay. It was great to talk to you.
Yeah, nice talking to you as well.
Thank you for listening to Before We Get There with your host, Nicholas Braman. Please like and subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Before We Get There Podcast. New episodes are released every Thursday morning. See you next time.